In the quiet corner of Columbia University's library, Ava Reynolds sits surrounded by stacks of books. Her dark hair falls over her face as she scribbles notes, but her eyes betray her exhaustion. At 22, she's a senior with dreams bigger than the cramped apartment she shares with her younger brother Jack. She's brilliant, the kind of student professors notice, but life hasn't been kind to her. Jack, only 16, has been battling kidney disease for years, and the medical bills keep piling up. Ava works late shifts at a small coffee shop in New York, barely sleeping just to keep him alive. She pulls out a worn notebook from her bag and writes a few lines. It's her secret journal, a place where she pours out her hopes of becoming a writer someday. But lately, all she writes about is Jack, how she'd give anything to see him healthy again. Her pen pauses as she stares at the page, her heart heavy with worry. Across the city, in a sleek office atop a Manhattan skyscraper, Lucas Grayson leans back in his chair. At 29, he's a billionaire with a name that echoes through New York's elite circles. His sharp features and piercing blue eyes make him striking, but there's a shadow in his gaze. He presses a hand to his chest, wincing as a familiar ache spreads through him. Lucas has a rare condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. His heart is weakening, growing larger and less efficient with every beat. Doctors say he needs a transplant, but the waiting list is long and time is running out. He's lived with this illness since childhood, a secret he guards closely. To the world, he's untouchable, a man who has everything: money, power, influence. But inside, he's alone, haunted by a past where his mother walked away and left him to fend for himself. Trust doesn't come easy to him. People see his wealth, not his pain. Their worlds collide on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Ava's behind the counter at the coffee shop, wiping down tables after a busy shift. The bell above the door jingles and Lucas walks in. He's dressed in a tailored coat, looking out of place among the chipped mugs and worn wooden floors. Ava barely glances up, too tired to care, until he sits at a corner table and orders a black coffee. Minutes later, she notices him clutching his chest, his face paling. Instinct kicks in. She rushes over, asking if he's okay. He fumbles with his coat pocket and she spots a small bottle of pills. Without hesitation, she grabs it, hands him one, and fetches a glass of water. His breathing steadies, and he looks up at her with those striking blue eyes. "Thank you," he murmurs, his voice low and rough. Ava nods, brushing it off, but there's something in his gaze that lingers. Lucas starts coming back, not every day, but often enough that Ava notices. He always sits in the same corner, orders the same coffee, and watches her with a quiet intensity. They exchange small talk at first, about the weather, the city, nothing deep, but over time it shifts. He asks about her studies and she mentions Columbia, her love for literature. She asks why he's always alone and he shrugs, saying he prefers it that way. There's a warmth in these moments, a spark neither of them expects. Ava finds herself smiling more when he's around, and Lucas feels a flicker of something he hasn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or just the comfort of her presence. She doesn't know who he really is, not yet. To her, he's just a guy who likes coffee and tips well. Night, after the shop closes, Lucas waits for her outside. Ava locks the door, her coat pulled tight against the chilly New York wind. He steps forward, hands in his pockets, and she senses something different about him tonight. His usual calm is replaced by a nervous edge. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he says, his voice steady but his eyes searching hers. "I know about your brother." Ava freezes, her stomach dropping. How does he know about Jack? She hasn't told him anything. Before she can ask, he continues, "I can pay for his surgery, all of it. The hospital bills, the follow-up care, everything." Her heart leaps, hope surging through her. But then he adds, "But there's a condition." She stares at him, waiting. He takes a breath, then says it. "You have to sleep with me for one night." The words hit her like a punch. Her steps back, her face flushing with shock and anger. What kind of person says something like that? She wants to scream, to slap him, to walk away and never look back. But the image of Jack lying in a hospital bed flashes in her mind. His pale face, his weak smile. She's been fighting so hard to save him, and now this stranger, this man she thought she was starting to like, is dangling her brother's life in front of her like a twisted game. "Who are you?" she demands, her voice trembling. Lucas doesn't flinch. "My name is Lucas Grayson," he says simply, as if that explains everything. "And I can give you what you need." Ava's mind races. She's heard the name before, whispered in the news, a billionaire with a reputation for getting what he wants. But why her? Why this? She stands there, the streetlights casting long shadows around them. Her hands clench into fists, nails digging into her palms. She thinks of Jack, how he looked at her last night and said he didn't want to be a burden anymore. She thinks of the hospital bills she can't pay, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing him. Lucas watches her, his expression unreadable, but there's something in his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability she can't quite place. It's not lust, not greed, but something else. She hates him for this, for putting her in this position, but she's trapped. The silence stretches between them, heavy and tense. Finally, she lifts her chin, her voice barely above a whisper. "One night," she says. "That's it." Lucas nods, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though it doesn't reach his eyes. "One night," he agrees. As Ava walks away, her heart pounds in her chest. She doesn't know what she's just agreed to or what kind of man Lucas Grayson really is. All she knows is that Jack might live because of it, and that's enough for now. But deep down, a small part of her wonders why Lucas looked at her like that, like he was the one making a sacrifice, not her. The city hums around them, oblivious to the deal they've just made, a deal that will change everything. Ava stands outside Lucas Grayson's Manhattan apartment, her heart racing as she clutches her coat tighter. The building towers over her, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the crumbling walk-up she calls home. She spent the day wrestling with his offer, torn between anger and desperation. Jack's face kept flashing in her mind, his frail hands gripping hers, his voice begging her not to worry. She called the hospital that morning, and the doctor's words echoed in her ears. Without surgery soon, Jack wouldn't make it past the month. So here she is, stepping into the unknown, ready to trade one night for her brother's life. She presses the buzzer, and a soft voice tells her to come up. The elevator ride feels endless, each floor ticking by like a countdown to something she can't name. Lucas opens the door, his blue eyes catching the light. He's dressed simply, a black sweater and jeans, nothing like the billionaire she imagined. "Come in," he says, stepping aside. The apartment is breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows showing off the New York skyline, but Ava barely notices. She stands stiffly in the living room, her hands clenched, waiting for him to make a move. Instead, he gestures to a plush sofa. "Sit," he says. "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice is calm, almost gentle, and it throws her off. She sits, her back rigid, watching him pour 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He hands her one and sits across from her, leaving a wide space between them. She doesn't touch the glass. "What do you want from me?" she asks, her tone sharp. Lucas leans back, studying her. "I want to know who you are," he says. "That's all." Eva blinks, confused. "You said one night," she snaps. "This isn't a game." "I'm here because I have to be." He nods, as if he expected that. "I know," he replies, "but I don't want what you think I want. I'm not after your body, Ava. I just need someone to stay with me tonight." She stares at him, trying to read his face. Is this some kind of trick? He takes a sip of water, then sets the glass down. "I've been alone a long time," he says quietly. "People look at me and see money, nothing else. I wanted to see if you'd say no, if you'd walk away. But you didn't. Why?" Her throat tightens. "Because of Jack," she says, her voice breaking. "He's all I have left." Lucas looks at her, really looks at her, and something shifts in his expression. "Tell me about him," he says. Ava hesitates, then starts talking. She tells him about Jack's laugh, how he used to draw comics before he got sick, how he still tries to make her smile even now. Lucas listens, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finishes, he surprises her again. "My mother left when I was 6, he says. "I woke up one day and she was gone. No note, no goodbye. I've been trying to figure out why ever since." Ava softens, just a little. "That's awful," she whispers. He shrugs. "It's why I don't trust people. But you're here for someone else. That's rare." The hours slip by as they talk. Lucas opens up about his childhood, the loneliness that followed him into adulthood, the fear of dying alone with this broken heart of his. Ava shares her dreams of writing, how she's had to put them aside for Jack. The tension in her shoulders eases, and she finds herself laughing at his dry humor, a sound she hasn't heard from herself in months. It's late when her eyes start to droop. "You should rest," Lucas says. She shakes her head, but he stands, offering his hand. "Come on," he says. "I'll take the couch." She lets him lead her to a guest room, but as she climbs into the bed, he lingers at the door. "Can I ask one more thing?" he says. She nods, half asleep. He steps closer and takes her hand, holding it gently. "Stay like this, just for a minute," he murmurs. Ava doesn't pull away. His touch is warm, steady, and she drifts off with his hand in hers. When she wakes, he's gone, but a note on the pillow says the money's been sent to the hospital. Jack's surgery is scheduled the next week, and Ava can breathe again. But Lucas doesn't disappear. He shows up at the coffee shop a few days later, ordering his usual black coffee. "Thanks for the other night," he says casually, like it was nothing. She blushes, unsure how to respond. "You didn't have to do that," she says. "Pay for Jack, I mean." He smirks. "I wanted to." After that, he keeps coming back. They fall into a rhythm, small moments that build into something more. He invites her to dinner one evening, a quiet place with dim lights and soft music. They walk through Central Park another night, the leaves crunching under their feet as they talk about everything and nothing. Ava starts to see past the billionaire facade, to the man who hides his pain behind a sharp smile. Lucas feels lighter with her, like the weight on his chest isn't just his failing heart. One rainy evening, everything changes. Ava's shift ends late and a downpour catches her outside the shop. Lucas pulls up in his car, offering her a ride. She hesitates, then climbs in, soaked to the bone. He drives her to his apartment, insisting she dry off. Inside, he hands her a towel and one of his sweaters, too big but warm. They sit by the window, watching the rain streak the glass. "You're different, you know," he says softly. She looks at him, her pulse quickening. "Different how?" she asks. He doesn't answer with words. Instead, he leans in and she meets him halfway. Their kiss is slow, tentative, then deepens with a hunger neither expected. The rain pounds outside as they move closer, clothes slipping away in the heat of the moment. It's not planned, not forced, just two people finding solace in each other. Afterward, they lie together, breathless, his arms around her. "I didn't mean for this," he whispers. She smiles, tracing his jaw. "Neither did I." The next morning, Ava leaves with a quiet goodbye, her heart a tangle of feelings. She doesn't know it yet, but that night planted a seed, a life growing inside her. Lucas watches her go, his chest aching for reasons beyond his illness. He wants to call her back, to tell her what she's starting to mean to him, but he doesn't. Not yet. They've crossed a line, and neither of them knows how to step back. For Ava, it's a moment of weakness, a lapse in her guarded world. For Lucas, it's a glimpse of something real, something worth holding on to. But life, as it often does, has other plans. The hospital calls that afternoon. Jack's surgery is set, and Ava throws herself into preparing for it. Lucas keeps his distance, unsure how to bridge the gap they've stumbled into. Neither of them realizes that one night, born from a strange deal and an unexpected connection, has already changed their futures forever. Ava sits by Jack's hospital bed, holding his hand as the machines beep softly around them. It's been a week since Lucas paid for the surgery, And today the doctors say Jack's new kidney is working. He's still weak, his face pale against the white sheets, but he squeezes her fingers and smiles. "You did it, sis," he whispers. Ava brushes his hair back, her chest tight with relief. "I'd do anything for you," she says, and she means it. The weight of the past months lifts just a little, and she lets herself hope for the first time in ages. She thinks of Lucas, the strange night they shared, the way he's woven himself into her life since then. She hasn't seen him since that rainy evening, the one that left her breathless and confused. But his absence feels louder than his presence ever did. That afternoon, she stops by the coffee shop to pick up her paycheck. Her boss hands her an envelope with a grin, saying someone left a big tip for her last week. Ava opens it and finds a note tucked inside, Lucas's neat handwriting scrawled across the paper. "Meet me tonight," it says. 7 p.m., my place. She stares at it, her stomach fluttering. Part of her wants to go, to see where this fragile thing between them might lead. Another part wants to run, to protect herself from whatever he is, a man who buys nights and breaks rules. She decides to go, if only to thank him again for Jack. She pulls on a simple dress, her hands trembling as she brushes her hair, and heads to his apartment. Lucas opens the door and Ava's breath catches. He looks tired, paler than usual, his blue eyes shadowed. "You okay?" she asks, stepping inside. He nods, but his smile doesn't reach his eyes. "Just a long day," he says, leading her to the living room. They sit, and for a moment it's like before, easy and warm. He asks about Jack, and she tells him how her brother's already planning to draw again. Lucas laughs, a soft sound that makes her heart ache. She's about to ask why he wanted to see her when he suddenly winces, pressing a hand to his chest. Ava's on her feet in an instant. "What's wrong?" she demands. He waves her off, but then he doubles over, gasping. She grabs his phone, dials 911, and within minutes, paramedics burst through the door. At the hospital, Ava paces the waiting room, her mind racing. She's never seen Lucas like this, vulnerable, human. A doctor finally approaches, explaining that Lucas had a heart episode, a complication from his condition. He's stable now, but he needs a transplant soon, or he won't make it. Ava's stomach drops. She didn't know it was this bad. She slips into his room, where he lies hooked to machines, his chest rising and falling slowly. He opens his eyes, managing a weak smile. "You didn't have to stay," he murmurs. She sits beside him, taking his hand. "I wanted to," she says. They sit in silence, her thumb brushing his knuckles, and she realizes how much he's come to mean to her. The next day, Ava overhears something that changes everything. She's in the hallway, bringing coffee back to Lucas's room, when she catches Eleanor's voice from around the corner. She's talking to the doctor, her tone cold and clipped. "He needs a heart, and we need it fast," Eleanor says. The doctor mentions Ava's name, something about her rare blood type matching Lucas's, pulled from Jack's medical records when she tested as a potential donor. Ava freezes, the coffee cups trembling in her hands. Eleanor's voice hardens. "If it comes to it, we'll make it happen." Ava's head spins. Are they planning to use her? To take her heart? She stumbles back to Lucas's room, her thoughts a jumbled mess, but he's asleep, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. That night, alone in her apartment, Ava takes a pregnancy test. She bought it on a hunch, her body feeling off since that rainy night with Lucas. The two pink lines stare back at her, and she sinks to the bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face. She's carrying his child, a piece of him growing inside her, and now she's terrified he might not live to know it. She decides to keep it a secret, at least until she figures out what Eleanor's words meant. The next morning, she gets a call from Columbia. Her application for a full scholarship to study in France has been accepted, a dream she'd almost forgotten. It's a way out, a chance to start over, but it means leaving Lucas, leaving Jack, leaving everything. She writes a letter to the university, asking to defer, her heart set on staying for Lucas. She can't abandon him now, not when he's fighting to live. but fate has other plans. Eleanor finds the letter in Ava's bag when she leaves it in Lucas's room during a visit. She sees an opportunity to get Ava out of the picture, to keep Lucas focused on survival, not some coffee shop girl. She takes Ava's phone from the bag, types a message, and sends it to Lucas. "I got the scholarship in France." It reads, "I'm leaving. Don't try to find me. Thanks for everything." Lucas wakes to the text, his heart sinking as he reads it. He stares at the screen, the words blurring through his tears. He thinks Ava chose her future over him, that the night they shared, the moments after, meant nothing to her. He doesn't know Eleanor sent it, doesn't know Ava's still in New York, planning to stay. He tells the doctors to move him to a private facility upstate, away from the city, away from her. He needs to focus on living, or at least surviving, without her. Ava finds out he's gone when she visits the hospital the next day. The nurse says he left that morning, no forwarding address. She tries calling, but his number's disconnected. Her chest tightens with panic, then anger. Did he leave because of the pregnancy? Did he somehow find out and run? She doesn't know. He thinks she's halfway to France. She sits on her bed that night, cradling her still flat stomach, whispering to the life inside her. "It's just us now," she says, her voice breaking. She decides to keep the baby no matter what. She'll raise it alone if she has to. A piece of Lucas she'll never let go. Months pass, and Ava's belly grows. Jack recovers slowly, moving back home with her help. She quits the coffee shop, takes a part-time job at a bookstore, and saves every penny for the baby. She names him Noah, after a character in one of her favorite novels, a name that feels like a promise. Labor comes on a snowy night, and she gives birth alone in a small hospital room, gripping the rails as pain tears through her. Noah's cries fill the air, and she holds him close, his tiny face a mirror of Lucas's blue eyes. She doesn't know that Lucas, miles away, nearly died that same night, his heart failing until a blood transfusion pulled him back. She doesn't know he gave that blood months ago when she fainted during a prenatal visit, a secret donation he'd arranged through Father Michael. All she knows is that she's a mother now, and she'll do anything to protect her son, even if it means burying the love she once felt for the man who left her behind. 6 years have passed since Ava last saw Lucas Grayson, and her life has settled into a quiet rhythm. She lives in a modest apartment on the edge of New York, raising Noah on her own. At 5 years old, Noah is a bright spark, with Lucas's piercing blue eyes and a smile that lights up her world. Ava works as a part-time secretary at a small law firm, her dreams of writing tucked away in a drawer alongside Noah's crayons. She's built a life for them, simple but steady, though the ache of losing Lucas never fully fades. She doesn't talk about him, not even to Jack, who's now healthy and studying art at a community college. But every time Noah asks about his father, her heart twists. She tells him gentle lies, that his dad was a good man who had to go away, and Noah accepts it with a child's trust. Across the city, Lucas has been fighting his own battles. After leaving New York, he spent years in and out of hospitals, his heart condition worsening until he could barely walk. Doctors kept him alive with medications and machines, but he refused to give up. He thought of Ava every day, her face the one thing that pulled him through the darkest nights. He believed she was in France, living the life she chose, and he tried to let her go, but he couldn't. Through Father Michael, a kind priest who'd known him since childhood, Lucas quietly kept tabs on her. He learned she never left, that she was raising a boy, and a suspicion grew in his chest, one he didn't dare voice. He sent money for Noah's preschool, anonymous donations for Jack's medical follow-ups, small acts to ease his guilt. He's back in New York now, weaker but alive, determined to see her one last time. Their paths cross on a crisp fall day. Ava is at the park with Noah, watching him chase leaves across the grass. He's been running a fever lately, nothing serious, she thinks, just a cold, but today he stumbles, his little legs giving out, and Ava scoops him up, her stomach nodding with worry. She's about to call a cab when a familiar voice stops her. "Ava?" Lucas stands a few feet away, his coat hanging loose on a frame thinner than she remembers. His blue eyes lock onto hers, and time seems to freeze. She clutches Noah tighter, her breath catching. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice sharp with old pain. He steps closer, glancing at Noah, and his face softens. "I was walking by," he says. "Is he okay?" Ava nods, but Noah coughs, his cheeks flushed, and Lucas insists. "Let me take you to the hospital. I have a car." Ava wants to refuse, to walk away from the man who vanished, but Noah's fever spikes and she relents. They drive in silence, Lucas stealing glances at Noah in the back seat. At the hospital, a doctor examines him, running tests while Ava paces the waiting room. Lucas stays, sitting quietly, his hands clasped tight. The doctor returns with news that makes Ava's knees weak. Noah's fever isn't a cold, it's a rare infection tied to a blood disorder he's had since birth. He's stable now, but he'll need monitoring. Ava presses a hand to her mouth, tears welling up. Lucas reaches for her, then stops himself. "How long has he been sick?" he asks. Ava shakes her head. "I didn't know," she whispers. "He was fine until recently." The doctor pulls Lucas aside later, recognizing him from years ago. "There's something you should know," he says. "When Noah was born, his mother collapsed during delivery. She needed a transfusion, and you were the donor. Your blood type matched perfectly, saved them both." Lucas stares, his mind racing back to that night 6 years ago, when Father Michael called him to the hospital. He'd given blood without asking questions, never knowing it was for Ava, for his son. He turns to her, his voice trembling. "Noah's mine, isn't he?" Ava looks up, startled, then sees the truth in his eyes. She nods, tears spilling over. "Yes," she says. "He's yours." They move to a quiet corner of the hospital, Noah resting in a room nearby. Ava tells him everything. The night in the rain, the pregnancy she hid, the years she thought he'd abandoned her. "I found out after you helped Jack," she says. "I was going to tell you, but then you were gone." Lucas listens, his face crumpling as she speaks. "I didn't leave because of you," he says. "My mother sent a message from your phone, said you took a scholarship in France." "I thought you didn't want me." Ava's eyes widen, anger flaring. "Eleanor did that?" she asks. Lucas nods, shame washing over him. "I should have fought harder to find you. I was a fool." Ava wipes her tears, looking at him, really looking. He's thinner, older, but still the man who held her hand that strange night, who kissed her in the rain. "Why didn't you tell me about your heart?" she asks. He shrugs. "I didn't want you to stay out of pity. I wanted you to choose me." She laughs, a broken sound. "I did choose you," she says. "I gave up France for you. I stayed because I loved you." Lucas reaches for her hand, and this time she lets him take it. "I love you too," he says, his voice raw. "I never stopped. And Noah? He's everything I didn't know I needed." They sit together, hands clasped, watching Noah sleep through the glass. Ava tells him about their son, how he loves drawing like Jack, how he asks about his father with wide, curious eyes. Lucas smiles, tears glistening. "He's perfect," he says, "just like you." Ava leans her head on his shoulder, exhaustion and relief mingling inside her. She's carried so much alone, and now, here's Lucas, broken but alive, offering to carry it with her. She thinks of the years lost, the pain they've both endured, but also the child who binds them, a living proof of that fleeting love. Lucas breaks the silence. "I've been sick a long time," he says. "I didn't think I'd make it this far, but seeing you, seeing him, it's like I've been given a reason to keep going." Ava lifts her head, meeting his gaze. "Then keep going," she says. "For us." He nods, squeezing her hand. "I will," he promises. They stay there, the hospital hum fading into the background, a fragile hope blooming between them. Ava doesn't know what comes next, how they'll rebuild what was shattered, but for the first time in years, she feels whole. Noah stirs, his small hand twitching, and Lucas whispers, "I'm here, buddy. I'm not leaving again." Ava smiles through her tears, knowing they've found each other at last, and this time, they won't let go. Ava and Lucas sit together in the hospital, their hands still clasped as Noah sleeps peacefully in the next room. The air between them feels lighter now, the years of misunderstanding melting away with every word they share. Ava glances at Lucas, noticing the lines etched into his face, the weariness in his posture. He catches her looking and smiles, a small, tired curve of his lips. "I've missed that," he says. "What?" she asks. "You, looking at me, like I'm more than just a broken heart," he replies. She squeezes his hand, her chest swelling with a warmth she hasn't felt in years. They're starting over, she thinks, and this time, they have Noah to hold them together. But peace doesn't last long. A few days later, as Noah recovers at home, Ava gets a call from an unknown number. She answers, and a cold voice cuts through the line. "This is Henry Grayson, Lucas's brother," it says. "I hear you're back in his life. Stay away or I'll make sure you regret it." Ava's stomach drops. She's never met Henry, but she knows his reputation, a man driven by envy and greed. She tells Lucas that night, her voice trembling as she recounts the threat. He pulls her close, his jaw tight. "He's been after the family money for years," Lucas says. "He thinks I'm in the way. I'll handle it." Ava nods, trusting him, but a shadow of fear lingers in her mind. Henry doesn't wait. He files a lawsuit the next week, claiming Lucas is unfit to manage the Grayson fortune due to his illness. He demands guardianship over the estate, arguing that Ava and Noah are a distraction, a drain on resources. Lucas meets with lawyers, his health fragile but his resolve firm. "I won't let him touch you," he tells Ava, his blue eyes blazing. She believes him, but the stress takes its toll. Lucas collapses during a meeting, his heart failing under the strain, and he's rushed to the hospital again. Ava stays by his side, Noah clutching her hand as they wait for news. The doctor emerges, his face grim. "He needs a transplant now," he says. "We've moved him to the top of the list, but it's a long shot." Days turn into weeks, and Lucas clings to life, hooked to machines that beep in a steady rhythm. Ava spends every moment she can with him, reading to him from her old journal, telling him about Noah's drawings, anything to keep him here. Noah visits too, his small voice whispering stories about superheroes to his dad. Ava watches them, her heart breaking and mending all at once. She prays for a miracle, something to save the man she's loved through all the pain. Father Michael comes often, sitting with her in the quiet hours. He's been working behind the scenes, he says, calling in favors, reaching out to donors. "I've known Lucas since he was a boy," he tells her. "He's stubborn, but he's worth saving." Ava smiles through her tears, grateful for this gentle man who's become their anchor. Then the call comes. It's late, rain tapping against the hospital windows when the doctor rushes in. "We have a heart," he says. "A donor match just came through." Ava's knees buckle, relief flooding her. Lucas is wheeled into surgery and she waits, hours stretching into an eternity. Noah curls up in her lap, his head resting on her shoulder. "He'll be okay, right, Mommy?" he asks. She kisses his forehead, whispering, "Yes, baby. He has to be." When the doctor finally returns, his smile says it all. "The transplant worked," he says. "He's stable." Ava sobs, hugging Noah tight, a weight lifting she didn't know she could bear. Lucas wakes the next day, groggy but alive. Ava sits beside him, Noah perched on the bed, showing him a drawing of a family, 3 stick figures under a bright sun. "That's us," Noah says proudly. Lucas takes the paper, his hands trembling slightly, and looks at Ava. "Thank you for waiting," he says, his voice hoarse. She leans in, resting her forehead against his. "Thank you for coming back," she replied. They stay like that, a quiet moment of healing, until Henry's shadow looms again. He storms into the room, his face twisted with fury. "You think this changes anything?" he snarls. "I'll fight you in court until you're broke." Lucas sits up, weak but defiant. "Take it," he says. "The money, the company, all of it. I don't need it anymore. I have them." Henry freezes, stunned by the words. Ava looks at Lucas, her eyes wide. "You'd give it all up?" she asks. He nods, reaching for her hand. "You and Noah are worth more than any fortune," he says. "I've spent too long chasing things that don't matter." Henry scoffs. But there's nothing left to fight for. He walks out, defeated, leaving them in peace. Ava stares at Lucas, a mix of awe and love washing over her. She didn't expect this. Didn't know he could let go of everything he'd built. But she sees it now, the man he has become, the one who'd trade the world for a chance at a family. A few weeks later, Lucas is home, recovering in a small house Ava bought with money she'd secretly saved. She reveals her surprise one evening, sitting him down at the kitchen table. "I wrote a book," she says, pulling a paperback from a drawer. "It's about us. That night you changed everything and all the years after. I published it last year under a pen name. The royalties paid for this place." Lucas takes the book, his fingers tracing the title. One Night's Prom. He opens it, reading the dedication. "To the man who gave me a reason to stay, and the boy who gave me a reason to fight." His eyes glisten as he looks up at her. "You're incredible," he says. She smiles, shy but proud. "I had to tell our story," she says. "It's how I kept you with me." That night, as a soft rain falls outside, Lucas pulls Ava close on the porch. Noah's asleep inside, his crayons scattered across the table. Lucas takes her hand, his touch stronger now, the new heart beating steady in his chest. "Marry me," he says, his voice low and sure. "I've wasted too much time not being yours." Ava's breath catches, tears welling up. She thinks of the night they met, the deal that broke her, the love that mended her. "Yes," she says, nodding through her smile. "Yes, 1,000 times." He kisses her, slow and deep, the rain a gentle chorus around them. Noah wakes just then, toddling out in his pajamas. "Are you my dad now?" he asks, rubbing his eyes. Lucas kneels, pulling him into a hug. "I've always been your dad, buddy," he says. Noah grins, wrapping his arms around them both. "Good," he says, "I like that." The days that follow are simple, perfect. Lucas heals, growing stronger with every sunrise. Ava writes again, her words flowing freely now, inspired by the life they're building. Noah draws pictures of their little family, taping them to the fridge. One afternoon they drive to a field outside the city, the grass golden in the late light. Lucas lifts Noah onto his shoulders, and Ava laughs as they chase each other, a kite soaring above them. She watches, her heart full, knowing this is what she fought for, what Lucas survived for. The camera lingers on them, a family born from a single night, a promise kept through years of pain. The voiceover fades in, soft and warm. From a deal made in desperation, they found a love that lasted forever, and in the end, that was everything.
Ethan Caldwell believed his life was perfectly structured. As the CEO of Caldwell Innovations, a leading medical technology corporation, he devoted nearly every waking moment to his work. With a schedule optimized to the minute, there was no room for surprises or chaos. This morning, Ethan strode briskly through LAX's VIP terminal, answering emails while instructing his assistant on the upcoming meetings in New York. Private jets were his usual mode of travel, but a mechanical issue had forced him onto a commercial flight. First class, of course. "Reschedule all morning meetings if necessary. I want the Zurich contract signed before noon tomorrow," he commanded, his voice sharp, his expression unreadable. To Ethan, success was defined by control over his time, his business, and the relationships around him. That was why, 3 years ago, when Sophia had mentioned wanting children, he had shut the idea down immediately. Children were unpredictable, a liability he couldn't afford. Today was no different, just another flight, another day. No surprises. He had no idea that, in just a few minutes, his entire world was about to be turned upside down. Ethan boarded the plane with his usual composure, confident, detached, entirely focused. When the flight attendant greeted him with a practiced smile, he offered only a curt nod before heading toward his seat. But the moment he stepped into the first-class cabin, his world tilted on its axis. In seat 3A, Sophia Bennett sat with 2 young boys beside her. She looked just as striking as he remembered. Soft brown hair framing her face, sharp yet serene eyes. But it wasn't her presence that sent a shock through his system. It was the children. 2 little boys with dark brown hair and stormy gray-blue eyes. His eyes. Ethan froze mid-step, breath catching in his throat. One of them looked up and spoke in a clear, innocent voice. "Mama, can I have my tablet now?" "Mama." The word hit Ethan like a thunderclap, reverberating through his chest. His fingers curled into fists, his heartbeat pounded against his ribs. He felt as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Sophia gently handed the child his tablet while the other twin leaned against her shoulder, clutching a well-worn stuffed elephant. They looked around 3 years old. His brain clicked into calculation mode. 3 years ago, the divorce, the timeline, the possibility. No, the certainty. It felt like a punch to the gut. Then, as if sensing his presence, Sophia looked up. Their eyes met, and for a split second, he saw raw panic flash across her face before she quickly looked away, pulling both boys closer. Ethan remained frozen, his mind unraveling in ways it never had before. He had built his empire on control, controlling risks, variables, and outcomes. But this was chaos. Finally, moving on autopilot, he took his seat, directly behind them. For the next 7 hours, Ethan didn't check his emails. He barely noticed the flight at all. All he could hear was the sound of laughter, quiet whispers, and the undeniable truth that shattered every carefully constructed plan he'd ever made. He had children. At exactly 10 a.m., Sophia Bennett stood in the sleek marble lobby of Caldwell Innovations, her heart pounding against her ribs. The security guard scanned her ID, his brows raising slightly as he read her name, Bennett. "Ms. Bennett, Mr. Caldwell is expecting you," he said, handing her a visitor's badge. Sophia clenched her fingers around the strap of her purse as she stepped into the elevator. She had spent the entire night preparing for this conversation. Ethan now knew about Noah and Liam, something she had worked tirelessly to keep from him for 3 years. Once, this building had been part of her life, back when she had been Mrs. Caldwell. Now, it was simply a monument to a world she no longer belonged to. When she entered Ethan's office, he stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her. The space looked exactly as she remembered. Minimalist, powerful, every detail curated to perfection. He turned as the door shut behind her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Sit down, Sophia." His voice was controlled, but she could hear the strain beneath the surface. She sat, spine straight, bracing herself. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Ethan's voice was rough, anger barely restrained. Sophia inhaled deeply. "I don't know," she admitted. "At first I planned to, but then I saw you on TV, announcing another corporate expansion. You looked so proud. You said it was possible because you had no distractions, no responsibilities. I was 8 weeks pregnant that night." Silence stretched between them. "You made that decision for me," Ethan said, his voice dark with unspoken fury. "You had no right." Sophia leaned forward, her tone sharp. "And you made that decision for me first, Ethan. You told me children were an anchor, a burden. I simply gave you exactly what you wanted." Ethan's jaw tightened, memories crashing down on him like a tidal wave. He had thought he controlled everything. But for the first time in his life, he realized there were things he had lost before he even knew they existed. 6 days later, Ethan stood in the small park near Sophia's home, gripping a paper bag containing 2 plush dinosaurs. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt nervous. Negotiating billion-dollar deals? No problem. Facing down the board of directors? Routine. But meeting his children for the first time? That was unfamiliar territory. He had arrived 45 minutes early, spending the time watching other children play, trying to picture what was about to happen. At exactly 9:55, he spotted Sophia entering the park, holding the hands of 2 small boys, Noah and Liam. They wore matching red jackets, but Ethan could already tell them apart. Noah, brimming with curiosity, skipped ahead eagerly, while Liam clung closer to their mother, his gaze more cautious. Sophia crouched down, whispering something to them. Noah turned to look at Ethan, his storm gray eyes wide. "Mama, is this the special person you told us about?" Liam studied Ethan for a long moment before nodding quietly. Ethan knelt to their level. "Hi, Noah. Hi, Liam." Noah tilted his head, considering. "Who are you?" Sophia answered gently. "Boys, this is Ethan. He's your father." Liam gripped his mother's hand tighter, while Noah blinked up at him thoughtfully. "Like Daniel's daddy at school?" Ethan cleared his throat, feeling uncharacteristically unsteady. "Yes, like that." A brief silence stretched between them. Then Noah suddenly asked, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Ethan reached into the paper bag and pulled out 2 plush Brachiosaurus toys, one with a blue ribbon, the other with a green one. "I do, and I heard you like Brachiosaurus." Liam's eyes widened. "Brachiosaurus is the tallest dinosaur." Noah giggled. "Liam knows everything about dinosaurs." Sophia smiled slightly, watching the tension in Ethan begin to ease. "How about we play a little?" she suggested. Noah didn't need to be told twice. He dashed off toward the playground. Liam hesitated, but when his brother waved at him, he slowly followed. Ethan remained standing there, watching his children for the first time, one bursting with energy, the other reserved but observant. And for the first time in years, he wondered, how much had he already missed? 6 weeks later, Ethan was in the middle of a board meeting when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Sophia. He nearly ignored it, but then a message appeared. "Noah fell at school. We're at the ER. Call me now." Everything in Ethan's mind went blank. He shot to his feet, ignoring the startled expressions of the board members. "This meeting is adjourned. I have an emergency." No explanation, no hesitation. He strode out of the conference room, already dialing his driver. Brooklyn Methodist Hospital, as fast as possible. The 20-minute drive felt like an eternity. Ethan didn't check his emails, didn't respond to messages from the board. His only focus was on Noah, the lively little boy with endless energy, and the fear in Sophia's text. When he arrived, he spotted Madison, Sophia's younger sister, sitting in the waiting area with Liam. The little boy clutched his stuffed elephant, eyes red-rimmed. "Daddy!" Liam ran to him, gripping Ethan's leg. "Noah's really hurt." Ethan scooped him up, holding him close. "Where's your mom?" "Inside with Noah." Madison pointed to the exam room. Without a second thought, Ethan pushed through the door. Sophia stood beside the hospital bed, holding Noah's small hand. The boy lay there, pale, his left arm immobilized. The moment he saw Ethan, his face lit up. "Daddy, you came." Ethan rushed to his side. "Of course I did." He gently brushed Noah's hair back. "What happened?" Sophia exhaled. He fell off the slide. His arm's broken, but it's a clean fracture. They're casting it now. Ethan looked at the small arm wrapped in bandages, feeling utterly powerless. For the first time, he understood that fatherhood wasn't just about joyful moments. It was about being there for the painful ones, too. Hours later, Ethan sat in the hospital waiting room, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling his senses. Every passing minute dragged on as he replayed the moment Noah had cried out in pain. His hands clenched into fists. This was a different kind of waiting than he was used to. In the boardroom, he was always in control, always making decisions. Here, he could do nothing but sit and hope. Finally, Sophia emerged, exhaustion etched into her features, but her eyes softer than before. "He's going to be fine," she said quietly. Relief crashed over Ethan like a wave, but the weight in his chest didn't lift completely. For the first time, he realized this was what it meant to truly be there for someone. And above all, never being absent when his child needed him the most. That evening, Ethan didn't return to the office. He sat on Sophia's couch, Noah resting his head on his lap, his small hand clutching a stuffed dinosaur. His newly casted arm was now decorated with cute stickers, while Liam sat beside him, carefully adding his own scribbles with a marker. "Daddy, are you really busy?" Noah asked sleepily. Ethan glanced at Sophia before looking down at his son. Not as busy as you. You did great today." Noah smiled drowsily and closed his eyes. Sophia stood, motioning for Ethan to follow her into the kitchen. "You skipped a major meeting today." Her voice held no judgment, only observation. Ethan folded his arms. It wasn't more important than being here with Noah. Sophia studied him for a moment before nodding. "You've changed." A long silence stretched between them. "I lost 3 years not knowing they existed," Ethan murmured, his throat tightening. The weight of that realization pressed down on him like an unbearable burden. His voice wavered for the first time in years. "I won't lose another second." The next morning, back in his office, Ethan stared at his calendar. Then, he called his assistant in and said simply, "Cancel all Saturday morning meetings. From now on, my Saturdays belong to my kids." And he meant it. The following weeks became a crash course in fatherhood. Saturday mornings at the park, bedtime stories filled with dinosaur facts, and the quiet moments when Liam would hesitantly reach for his hand. The transition wasn't easy. Noah was quick to accept him, but Liam was more cautious, watching, waiting. Yet, little by little, Ethan saw the walls between them crumble. The first time Liam voluntarily climbed into his lap during story time, Ethan knew he was no longer just the man from the plane. He was their father. By the time their 4th birthday approached, he wanted to give them something special, something that showed them and Sophia that he wasn't going anywhere. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Family would always come first. 3 months later, Ethan stood inside the Natural History Museum, watching his son stare in awe at the towering T-Rex skeleton. Today was Noah and Liam's 4th birthday, and he had spent weeks planning the perfect celebration. "Daddy, is this real?" Liam asked, eyes wide. Ethan crouched down, smiling. 100% real. And I invited a real paleontologist to tell you all about it." Noah cheered while Liam gripped Ethan's hand, a small gesture that tightened something deep in his chest. At the party, the boys unwrapped their presents and pulled out 2 carefully drawn pictures. One showed 4 figures standing in front of a skyscraper. The other, 4 figures inside a warm, cozy house. "See, Daddy?" Noah said. "It's our family." Ethan looked at Sophia, and in that moment, he understood what family truly meant. After the party, he led Sophia and the twins to a new house he had bought near their school. "I want to be close to them, close to you." Sophia was silent for a long moment before she whispered, "Let's take this one step at a time." Ethan nodded. He knew this wasn't just a choice. It was a promise, a father's promise. That night, freshly bathed and dressed in pajamas, Noah and Liam climbed into bed, each clutching their plush dinosaurs. Ethan sat between them, holding the book they had chosen. "Daddy, will you read to us every night?" Liam asked softly. Ethan glanced at Sophia, who stood by the doorway, watching them. Then he turned back to his sons and smiled. "Every night, if you want me to." Noah cheered, while Liam simply nodded, his eyes glowing with quiet hope. Sophia stepped forward, pulling the blankets up around the boys. She paused, looking at Ethan. "We're doing this right," she murmured. Ethan reached for her hand, gentle but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer right away, but when Noah turned to ask, "Daddy, are you staying forever?" she met Ethan's gaze, and together they answered, "Yes, forever." And there, in a cozy Brooklyn home beneath the warmth of a soft bedroom light, a family was rebuilt. Not as they once were, but as they were always meant to be. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan knelt in the living room, watching as his 2 sons whispered conspiratorially. "Do you think we can do it?" Noah asked Liam, eyes twinkling with excitement. Liam nodded seriously. "Just remember, you have to say, 'Mommy, marry Daddy.'" Ethan chuckled, adjusting their tiny collars. "Ready, boys?" Both nodded eagerly before dashing into the kitchen, where Sophia was making tea. "Mommy?" Noah tugged at her hand. "We have a very important question." Sophia turned, raising an eyebrow. "What is it, sweetheart?" Liam took a deep breath, then said solemnly, "Mommy, marry Daddy." Before Sophia could respond, Ethan stepped forward, dropping to one knee, a simple yet elegant ring in his hand. Ethan took a steadying breath, his hands tightening around the small velvet box. "I lost you once," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "And in those years, I learned what truly matters. Not boardrooms, not billion-dollar deals, you, our boys, our family." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Sophia, will you give me the chance to do this right? To love you the way you deserve? Will you marry me? Again?" Sophia looked at him, then at their two sons, her eyes shimmering with happy tears. "Yes," the boys shrieked in excitement, jumping up and down as Ethan slipped the ring onto Sophia's finger. Noah tugged at his sleeve, eyes wide with curiosity. "So does this mean we get to have a wedding?" Sophia laughed, wiping away a tear. "Yes, sweetheart, but something small, just family." And so, over the next few weeks, preparations began. Not for a grand, extravagant affair, but for something that felt right. A quiet ceremony in their backyard, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. Every night as they planned, Ethan found himself marveling at how different this was from their first wedding. This time, there were no cold, corporate guest lists, no pressure to impress, just them, their sons, and the promise of a fresh start. The boys cheered, throwing their arms around their parents. Ethan smiled, pulling Sophia into his arms. This time, he knew for certain it was forever. 2 months later, on a gentle spring afternoon, Ethan and Sophia stood in the small garden behind their home, hand in hand, surrounded by the people who mattered most. No extravagant wedding, no hundreds of guests, just family, close friends, and the two most important participants, Noah as the ring bearer, Liam as the flower keeper. As Sophia stepped outside in a simple white dress, Noah tugged at his father's hand. "Daddy, Mommy looks so pretty." Ethan smiled, eyes locked on her. "I know." The ceremony was intimate, filled with warmth and love. When the officiant asked, "Ethan, do you promise to love and cherish Sophia this time and forever?" Ethan held her hand tighter, his voice steady. "I do, forever." When Sophia whispered, "I do," Liam giggled. "Now kiss." Laughter filled the air as Ethan pulled Sophia into a soft kiss, surrounded by applause and cheers from their family. Noah and Liam ran forward, wrapping their little arms around their parents. This time they weren't just a couple. They were a family. And this was the beginning of their happily ever after. New York never slept, and neither did Nathan Carter. In his world, every second held a monetary value. As the city lights flickered against the glass skyline, he sat in his high-rise office at Carter Capital, eyes locked onto his monitor, where numbers danced in a never-ending rhythm of financial power plays. His phone vibrated lightly on the desk. A message. He glanced at the screen. "Ileana, I made dinner. If you make it home in time, we can eat together." Nathan exhaled sharply, barely acknowledging the message before setting the phone aside. He had no time for distractions. His upcoming meeting with European investors would determine the success of a multi-million-dollar deal. Dinner could wait. Across the city, in their penthouse, a place they once called home, Ileana Carter sat at the dining table. The elegant setting, candles casting a warm glow, beautifully arranged dishes, but only one seat was occupied. She stared at her phone, waiting for a response. "On my way. Be there soon." Anything. Nothing came. Minutes passed. The food grew cold. Eventually, she sighed, standing up to clear the table, a ritual she had grown used to. Their marriage had started as a dream. Nathan, the brilliant, ambitious man she had admired from afar, gracing the covers of financial magazines. When they first fell in love, he could spend hours talking about his dreams, about how he would build something revolutionary. Ileana had fallen in love with that fire in him. But now, she wasn't sure anymore. Nathan was no longer the man who once shared his wild ideas with her late into the night. Now, their conversations revolved around quarterly reports and investment strategies. She felt like just another element in his meticulously planned life, one he often forgot. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Ileana gazed out at the pulsing city below. She loved New York, loved the energy of it all, but she hated feeling lonely in a place that was supposed to be her home. Somewhere across town, Nathan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The meeting had ended, leaving him drained. He unlocked his phone, rereading Elena's message. For a split second, hesitation flickered in his chest. Then he placed the phone down, unread messages stacking atop one another. Beyond the towering windows of his office, New York glowed with endless possibilities. But inside him, an unfamiliar emptiness crept in. Subtle at first, then heavier, like a weight he couldn't name. He didn't realize it yet, but he was already losing something far more valuable than any deal. Elena Carter was used to being admired. In the boardroom, she commanded attention effortlessly. Her sharp mind, creative instincts, and undeniable presence made her one of the most sought-after creative directors in New York. Clients trusted her vision, colleagues respected her leadership, but admiration at work meant little when she returned home to an empty apartment. At Thompson & Hayes Media, her days were filled with presentations, brainstorming sessions, and industry meetings. She thrived on the energy of it all, pouring herself into every campaign. But as soon as she stepped out of the office, an uncomfortable silence followed her home. She used to wait up for Nathan. In the first year of their marriage, she would sit by the living room window, reading a book, listening for the sound of the elevator doors opening. But slowly, she stopped waiting. She stopped asking what time he would be home. She stopped expecting. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, she walked into their penthouse, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The space was pristine, luxurious, but it felt cold, lifeless. She made herself a glass of wine, allowing herself a moment of quiet. Then her phone buzzed. Oliver Hayes? Elena, fantastic job today. You really brought that campaign to life. Let's celebrate sometime. Drinks on me. Elena hesitated before typing back. Thank you, Oliver. Appreciated. Short, polite, distant. But as she stared at the screen, she felt something stir. A reminder of what it felt like to be noticed, to be seen. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Oliver was the kind of man who noticed things, the kind who remembered details. He wasn't just a successful media mogul. He was charming, intuitive. In meetings, he always asked how her day was going. He listened. He made her feel seen in a way Nathan never did anymore. It wasn't dangerous, not yet, but it was something. As she sipped her wine, she thought about the version of herself she had lost, the woman who used to laugh easily, who used to believe in love stories, the woman who once thought marriage meant forever. Elena sighed, setting down her glass. Across town, Nathan was probably still in his office working late, completely unaware that something fragile in their marriage was beginning to crack. The Plaza Hotel was bathed in golden lights, its grand ballroom adorned with cascading roses and shimmering chandeliers. The annual Valentine's Charity Gala was one of the most prestigious events in New York, where the city's elite gathered in their finest attire, sipping champagne and making million-dollar donations with effortless grace. Elena had spent weeks organizing this event, ensuring every detail was flawless. It wasn't just another corporate gala. It was a masterpiece. The theme she had chosen, Hearts Unveiled, carried a meaning that only she truly understood. As she stood in front of the mirror in her private dressing suite, she took a deep breath. The deep sapphire bowl gown hugged her figure elegantly, its silk fabric flowing like the tide. Endless, mysterious, untouchable. Blue, the color of the ocean, the color of longing. Her hair, usually styled in sleek waves for corporate meetings, cascaded softly around her shoulders, framing her face with a delicate vulnerability. She barely recognized herself. There was no trace of the woman who used to sit alone at candlelit dinners, waiting for a husband who never came home on time. Tonight, she wasn't just Elena Carter, the business executive, the patient wife. Tonight, she was Elena. Outside the ballroom, luxury cars arrived one after another, spilling out CEOs, politicians, and celebrities into the grand entrance. Among them, Nathan Carter stepped out of his black car, dressed in an impeccable tuxedo. But for the first time, he wasn't the one commanding attention. As he entered the ballroom, conversation slowed. Eyes shifted toward the grand staircase. And then he saw her. Elena stood at the top of the marble staircase, a vision of quiet strength and grace. The crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow against the fabric of her dress, making her seem almost ethereal, like a wave frozen in time. She wasn't waiting for him. She wasn't looking for him. She was shining, and it had nothing to do with him. Nathan felt his throat tighten. How long had it been since he had truly seen her? Not as his wife, not as the woman who waited for him, but as someone untouchable, independent, radiant in her own right. And worst of all, he realized, she no longer needed him to see her, since he had seen her not just as the woman who supported him, but as someone independent, extraordinary. Then, before he could move, Oliver Hayes appeared. With effortless charm, Oliver reached for Elena's hand, his timing too perfect to be coincidental. The way he looked at her, the way he admired her, sent a sharp pang of something foreign through Nathan's chest. Jealousy. As Elena placed her hand in Oliver's, Nathan felt an unfamiliar sensation clawing at his gut. He had spent years believing that their marriage was stable simply because it existed, but for the first time he realized he might be losing her. The string quartet played a slow, haunting melody, filling the grand ballroom with an air of quiet intimacy. The dance floor gleamed under the golden chandeliers as couples moved in elegant rhythm, their bodies swaying in perfect harmony. Nathan Carter stood frozen at the edge of the room, his jaw clenched as he watched Oliver Hayes lead Elena toward the dance floor. His Elena. She moved with effortless grace, her sapphire gown flowing like ocean waves, mesmerizing and untouchable. As Oliver placed his hand on her waist, guiding her into the first steps of the dance, something inside Nathan snapped. Without thinking, without hesitation, he strode forward. As Oliver prepared to spin Elena, Nathan cut in, his grip firm yet controlled as he took her hand. "I believe this dance belongs to me." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with something unspoken. Elena stiffened in surprise, her breath catching as Nathan pulled her close. For the first time in years, she felt his presence, not just as her husband, not as the powerful businessman he always was, but as a man who finally realized what he stood to lose. Oliver hesitated for only a second before nodding, stepping back with a knowing smile. And just like that, Nathan and Elena were alone on the dance floor. The music continued, slow and delicate. Nathan's hand rested on the small of Elena's back, his touch unfamiliar yet strangely intimate. "You're full of surprises tonight," Elena murmured, her voice unreadable. Nathan's fingers tightened slightly around hers. "Maybe I finally realized I don't want to keep making the same mistakes." Their movements were flawless, as if their bodies remembered a rhythm their hearts had long forgotten. Yet, beneath the elegance, there was tension, an entire conversation happening between them without words. Nathan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had never been the jealous type. He had never thought he'd have to fight for something he assumed was his. But standing here, with Elena in his arms, he realized maybe she never had been. Maybe he had only borrowed her love, and now he had to earn it back. But looking into Elena's deep, stormy eyes, he saw a wall he had built with his own neglect, and he was terrified it was too late to tear it down. As the final notes of the melody drifted into silence, Nathan and Elena stood still in the center of the ballroom. Their hands remained intertwined, but the dance had ended. For the first time in years, he didn't want to let her go. Elena, however, was the first to pull away. She took a small step back, placing distance between them. Not much, but enough. Enough for Nathan to feel the unspoken words hovering in the space between them. "Nathan, why now?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard. There was no scripted answer for this. No business strategy, no calculated move. This was real, raw, terrifying. "Because I finally opened my eyes," he admitted, voice rough. Elena studied him, searching his face for something, maybe regret, maybe sincerity, maybe the love that once burned between them. "I spent so much time chasing success, thinking I was building something for us," Nathan continued. but all I did was leave you behind. And tonight, seeing the way you shine, I realize I might have already lost you." A flicker of emotion crossed Elena's face. Pain, longing, disbelief. "You didn't lose me tonight, Nathan," she exhaled softly. "You lost me a long time ago." The weight of her words hit him harder than any failed deal, harder than any market crash. He had taken her presence for granted, thinking she would always be there, always waiting. "Tell me it's not too late." His voice was quieter now, edged with something unfamiliar, fear. Elena hesitated. A part of her wanted to believe him, to believe that this moment meant something. But words were easy. She needed actions. "If you want to fight for me, Nathan, you'll have to prove it." She didn't wait for a response. With one last glance, she turned and walked away, leaving Nathan standing alone in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by people, but feeling more alone than ever. Nathan Carter had always believed that success came from grand gestures. Multi-million-dollar deals, high-stakes negotiations, strategic takeovers. But winning back his wife? It wasn't going to happen with one sweeping declaration of love. It would happen in the quiet moments. The first morning after the gala, Nathan woke up early for the first time in years. Instead of rushing to his office, he walked into the kitchen, where Elena was pouring her morning coffee. She looked at him, surprised. "You're up early?" Nathan hesitated, then reached for a cup. "Thought I'd have coffee with you." It was small, insignificant to anyone else, but to Elena, it was the first real sign of change. Days turned into weeks, and Nathan continued to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. He remembered how she liked her coffee, 1 sugar, no cream. He left hand-written notes on the counter before leaving for work. "Good luck with your presentation today." He started coming home on time, putting his phone away during dinner. He paid attention. One evening, Elena came home to find their penthouse softly lit, a familiar melody playing in the background. Nathan stood by the dining table where 2 plates were set, her favorite wine poured. "I know it's not much," he admitted, "but I'd like to have dinner with my wife tonight." Elena looked at him, truly looked at him. For the first time in a long time, she saw effort. She saw a man who was finally learning that love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up every single day. Time didn't heal wounds on its own, effort did. And Nathan Carter was putting in the effort. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, he rebuilt what he had unknowingly broken. He didn't just say he'd change, he proved it. Nathan showed up for Elena in ways he never had before. He took her to dinner without checking his phone once. He remembered anniversaries, not because his assistant reminded him, but because he wanted to celebrate them. He listened when she spoke, not just to respond, but to understand. And something shifted between them. One morning, as Nathan poured Elena her coffee, 1 sugar, no cream, he glanced up to see her watching him. A soft smile played on her lips. "What?" he asked. Elena shook her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. "I just never thought I'd see the day Nathan Carter made coffee for someone else." Nathan smirked. "I guess I'm full of surprises." She took the cup from his hand, their fingers brushing, a touch that felt different now. It wasn't hesitation anymore. It wasn't doubt. It was something new. Something they had almost lost, but somehow found again. Nathan didn't just win Elena back. They found each other again. Nathan Carter once measured success in numbers. Stock prices, profit margins, the size of his empire. But now he measured it in moments. In the way Elena's laughter filled their penthouse again. In the quiet mornings they shared over coffee, where work could wait, she came first. In the stolen glances across a dinner table, where his phone remained untouched. Their love was no longer a business deal, an arrangement held together by routine. It was something deeper now. One evening, as they walked through Central Park, Nathan reached for her hand. Without thinking, without hesitation, Elena glanced at him, surprised, but didn't pull away. Instead, she tightened her grip. "I don't think I ever asked you," Nathan murmured. That night at the gala, when I cut in, would you have rather danced with him? Elena stopped walking. The city lights reflected in her sapphire girl eyes, the same color as the gown she had worn that night, the night he almost lost her. She smiled, tilting her head. Would it matter? Nathan exhaled, then shook his head. No. He met her gaze. Because I'd still fight for you. Every single time. A slow smile spread across Elena's lips. Good, she whispered. Because that was love's true measure. Not in words, but in actions. Not in promises, but in presence. Nathan had once built an empire, believing it would make him whole. But now, as he walked hand in hand with Elena, he understood he wasn't building for himself anymore. He was building for them. Nathan had once built an empire, believing it would make him whole. But he had been wrong. Elena was the only thing he had ever truly needed. And this time, he wasn't going to forget that. Isla Bennett had always believed in the power of stories. As a part-time library assistant, books were not just her job, they were her escape. They offered the warmth that life had never given her. Growing up in foster care, Isla learned early that kindness often went unnoticed. She had never known what it felt like to have a real home, to have someone waiting for her at the end of the day. But she refused to dwell in self-pity. Instead, she worked tirelessly, spending her mornings at the library and babysitting at night, just to make ends meet. Her life was quiet, predictable, and lonely, but she managed, until that rainy afternoon. As Isla restocked the shelves, her eyes landed on a small boy sitting near the window. He was silent, withdrawn, his wheelchair slightly angled away from the bookshelf. A book rested on his lap, but what caught Isla's attention was not the book. It was the loneliness in his gaze. Minutes passed as she watched him struggle to reach for a book on a higher shelf. His small hands stretched upward, but no matter how much he tried, the book remained just beyond his grasp. Something in Isla's chest tightened. Without a second thought, she set down the book in her hands and stepped toward him. Isla walked toward the boy slowly, careful not to startle him. When she stopped beside him, he glanced up. His blue eyes, striking and intense, reminded her of the sky just before a storm. Need some help? Isla asked, gently. The boy blinked, surprised, as if he wasn't used to being noticed. Isla smiled, reaching for the book he had been struggling to grab and placing it in his lap. Here you go. Ben stared at the book, his fingers tracing the title, The Brave Knight and the Starlit Queen. I know this one, Isla said, crouching to meet his eye level. It's a great story. Ben nodded. I read it. A long time ago. There was something about the way he held the book, like it was something precious, something more than just paper and ink. Would you like me to read it to you? She asked, her voice soft but sincere. Ben's blue eyes widened slightly. Really? If you want, she added quickly, not wanting him to feel pressured. A long pause, then finally he nodded. Isla smiled, pulling up a chair next to him and opening the book. Her voice was warm and animated, breathing life into the characters on the pages. Ben listened intently, and when Isla changed her voice to match each character, a small, unexpected laugh escaped from his lips. For the first time that day, his eyes sparkled with something other than loneliness. And neither of them noticed that, from a distance, someone was watching. Somewhere across the city, Chris Dalton sat in his high-rise office, his eyes locked on the screen in front of him. The video footage was brief security camera footage from the library. At first, he hadn't paid much attention. Strangers occasionally showed kindness to Ben, but none of them ever stayed. They offered pity, then disappeared. But this woman, she was different. Chris studied the screen carefully. Isla Bennett hadn't just helped his son reach a book. She had listened. And when she read to him, when she animated the characters, when she made him laugh, that laugh, how long had it been since he had last heard it? Leaning back, Chris folded his arms, his expression unreadable. He was used to people wanting something from him. Money, influence, power. But Isla had no idea she was being watched. She had no reason to pretend. He turned to his assistant. Find out everything about her. The assistant gave a curt nod. Yes, Mr. Dalton. Chris looked back at the screen. Isla Bennett. He didn't know who she was, but he knew one thing. She had made his son smile again, and that made him want to know more. The next day, Isla returned to the library as usual, but something felt different. As she walked into the children's section, Ben was already there, sitting in the exact same spot as the day before, waiting. He saw her first, and the moment their eyes met, he asked, his voice filled with quiet hope, "Can you read to me again?" Such a simple request, and yet it carried a weight that Isla couldn't ignore. She smiled, settling into the chair beside him. "Of course." And just like that, a routine began. Every afternoon, Isla read to Ben. They lost themselves in stories of knights, princesses, grand adventures, and magic. At first, Isla was the one telling the stories, but little by little, Ben started sharing his own. He spoke of the books his mother used to read to him before she passed away. He talked about the adventures he wished he could have, running like the knights in his stories, exploring a world without limits. Isla listened. She never interrupted, never pitied him. She simply listened, and Ben noticed. For so long he had felt invisible, like people only saw his wheelchair and not him. But with Isla he felt like any other child, and that changed everything. But Isla had no idea that from a distance, Chris was still watching. He wasn't just reviewing security footage anymore. He had started arriving at the library early, finding a quiet corner where he could see Isla and his son. For the first time in years, he saw Ben truly happy. And Chris Dalton found himself unable to look away from Isla Bennett. Isla was rearranging books on the shelves when she felt it. A presence. She turned around. Standing a few feet away was a tall, sharply dressed man. He carried himself with an air of authority, one that demanded attention without a single word. She knew exactly who he was. Chris Dalton, billionaire, business mogul, and most importantly, Ben's father. But his eyes weren't as cold as the ones she had seen in magazine photos. They were intense, calculating, studying her with quiet scrutiny. "You're the one who's been reading to my son." His voice was deep, controlled. Isla blinked, caught off guard for only a second before steadying herself. "Yes." Chris didn't move, his gaze unwavering. "Why?" he asked. A simple question, but there was something in the way he said it that made Isla hesitate. "Why what? Why are you doing this?" Chris spoke slowly. "What do you want out of it?" A flicker of irritation rose in Isla's chest. "I don't want anything," she said firmly. "I just like reading to Ben." A long pause. Chris held her gaze, searching for something. Then, just for a split second, something unreadable flickered across his face. "Interesting." And with that, he turned and walked away. Isla let out a slow breath, realizing she had been holding it. She had no idea that this moment was only the beginning of something that would change her life forever. 2 days after their meeting at the library, Isla received a text from an unknown number. "Chris Dalton, I want to meet, 7 p.m. Le Vienne." She frowned at the screen. No explanation. No indication if this was an invitation or an order. But from what she knew of Chris Dalton, it was definitely an order. And she also knew she couldn't refuse. When Isla stepped into the luxurious restaurant, she immediately felt out of place. The chandeliers glowed overhead, the tables were draped in pristine white linens, and the elegantly dressed patrons moved as if they belonged to another world. But Chris belonged here. He was already seated, composed, exuding the effortless confidence of a man who controlled everything around him. When she approached, he simply gestured for her to sit. "I don't like wasting time," Chris began, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "I need you to help Ben." Isla hesitated. "What do you mean?" Chris leaned back slightly, his voice steady. "The doctors say Ben has a chance to walk again with the right therapy, but he doesn't believe in it. He's accepted his condition. He's afraid to hope." His tone remained controlled, but Isla caught the flicker of something deeper beneath it. Concern. "You're the only person he trusts. I need you to be there for him." Isla tightened her hands in her lap, overwhelmed. This wasn't just about reading to a child anymore. This was a real responsibility. She swallowed. What exactly are you asking me to do? Chris studied her for a moment, then said, I want you to move into my home. Isla's eyes widened. What? I'll pay you well. You won't have to worry about money again, Chris said, his voice calm but resolute. In return, you'll be with Ben throughout his therapy. You'll help him believe he can do this. Isla's heart pounded. This was too much. Too big. She looked at Chris, the powerful, composed billionaire sitting across from her. But then she thought of Ben, the boy with hopeful eyes whenever she read to him. And suddenly, she knew her answer. Taking a deep breath, she met Chris's gaze. All right, I'll do it. 3 days later, Isla stood at the gates of the Dalton estate, a small suitcase by her side. She had never seen anything so grand. Towering marble columns, massive glass windows that shimmered under the afternoon sun. The wrought iron gates slowly swung open, and Isla felt her pulse quicken. She didn't belong here. But she wasn't here for Chris Dalton. She was here for Ben. A butler escorted her inside. The estate was so vast that Isla could hear the echo of her own footsteps against the polished marble floors. Expensive paintings lined the walls, and crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed endless. Everything was too perfect, too foreign. She swallowed hard as the doors to the sitting room opened. Ben was there, sitting in his wheelchair, his eyes going wide when he saw her. Isla? She smiled, stepping closer. I told you, didn't I? I always keep my promises. Chris stood nearby, watching them. He didn't say a word, but there was a flicker of quiet satisfaction in his gaze. A butler led Isla to her room, but it wasn't just a room. It was a private suite, complete with a sitting area and a view of the estate gardens. Isla set her suitcase down, feeling slightly overwhelmed. But then she remembered the way Ben had looked at her, and she knew she had made the right choice. Starting tomorrow, she would be by his side as he embarked on the hardest journey of his life. And she had no idea that in the process, she would be changed forever too. The first few days at the Dalton estate passed in a blur of routine. Every morning, Isla accompanied Ben to his therapy sessions. Every afternoon, she helped him practice at home. Some days, he made progress. Other days, he wanted to give up. Isla never left his side, pushing him forward through every obstacle. And Chris, despite his demanding schedule, watched them closely. He often stood from a distance, silently observing as Isla encouraged Ben through each painstaking step. For the first time in years, he saw his son believe in himself again. One evening, Isla sat outside in the garden, gazing at the quiet night sky. She didn't notice Chris approaching until his deep voice cut through the silence. What are you thinking about? She turned, slightly startled, but then smiled. Ben, he's stronger than I ever imagined. Chris nodded, his expression softer than usual. Because of you. Isla let out a quiet laugh. I think it's mostly because of him. Silence settled between them. They both knew the past few days hadn't just changed Ben, it had changed them, too. Chris looked at Isla under the moonlight, realizing that for the first time in his life, he wanted to believe in something beyond business and power. And Isla, for the first time, felt her heart begin to beat for someone other than Ben. That day started like any other. Isla took Ben to his morning therapy session, guiding him through the exercises, encouraging him every step of the way. But something felt different today. Ben was more determined, less hesitant. After dinner, as Isla was about to leave his room, Ben suddenly spoke. Isla? She turned back. What is it, Ben? He bit his lip, hesitating, then said quietly, I want to try standing. Isla froze. I don't know if I can, he admitted, but if you're here. Without a moment's hesitation, Isla stepped closer, her eyes filled with unwavering faith. Let's try. Ben nodded, his small hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Isla placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, not to hold him up, just to remind him she was there. Ben took a deep breath, and then, slowly, he pushed himself up. For the first time in years, he was no longer sitting in his wheelchair. Chris walked in at that exact moment. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes widening as he took in the sight. His son standing on his own, though his legs trembled beneath him. Ben looked up, meeting his father's gaze. A bright, triumphant smile broke across his face. "Dad, I did it." And in that moment, not just Ben, but Isla and Chris too, knew that he had finally conquered the fear that had held him back for so long. Over time, Isla had become an irreplaceable part of the Dalton household. Ben grew stronger every day, no longer afraid of falling. Whenever he stumbled, Isla was always there to help him up, always there to remind him to keep going. And Chris, he changed too. He found himself spending less time at work, drawn home by something he couldn't quite name. Some nights he stood in the shadows of the hallway, watching Isla laugh with Ben, the sound of their happiness filling the once empty halls. He told himself it was because of Ben, that she was helping his son heal, but deep down, he knew the truth. Isla wasn't just changing Ben's life, she was changing his too. One evening, after tucking Ben into bed, Isla sat on the edge of his mattress, gently adjusting his blanket. Ben stared at her for a long moment before whispering. I was like, "Did my mom send you down to take care of me and Dad?" Isla froze, her heart tightening at his words. She gave him a soft smile, cupping his cheek. "I don't know, Ben, but if she did, I'd be honored." Ben beamed up at her, eyes full of trust. "Then don't ever leave." She squeezed his hand. "I won't." But as she stepped outside into the garden, she realized her own heart was still searching for an answer. That was when Chris appeared. "Isla." She turned, meeting his gaze, no longer distant or guarded, but raw and unshaken. "I don't just need you for Ben," he said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. "I need you for me." This time, Isla didn't push away what she already knew in her heart. She took a step closer, teasing, "And what if I say no?" Chris smirked. "I won't accept that." A quiet laugh escaped her lips before she whispered, "I don't want to leave either." Chris didn't wait any longer. He pulled her in, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, a silent promise that she had changed his world forever. Time passed, and Isla had become an irreplaceable part of the Dalton household. Ben grew stronger, not just physically but in spirit. He believed in himself, in his own strength, and Isla was the one who had given him that belief. And Chris, he changed too. He was no longer a man consumed by work. He spent more time at home, more time with his son and with Isla. One evening, after tucking Ben into bed, Isla stepped into the garden, letting the cool air calm her thoughts. She didn't know that Chris was waiting for her. "Isla." She turned, finding him standing there, not distant, not unreadable, but open. Chris stepped closer, taking her hand in his. "I've spent too many years chasing things that never truly mattered. But you made me see what does." Isla parted her lips to respond, but then Chris lowered himself onto one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I used to think love was a distraction, something that made men weak, but you proved me wrong. Every time I see you with Ben, every time I hear you laugh, I realize what I've been missing. Isla, you didn't just change Ben's life. You made me believe in something again, and I never want to lose that." Isla's breath hitched, tears stinging her eyes. Chris held her gaze, steady and unshaken. "Marry me, Isla." And in that moment she realized she had fallen for this man long ago. She didn't need to think. Isla nodded, her voice trembling but firm. "Yes." Chris rose to his feet, pulling her into his arms before pressing a deep, lingering kiss against her lips, a promise that from this moment on she would never be alone again. And from the window, Ben watched them with a knowing smile. Softly, he whispered, as if speaking to his mother in heaven, "Mom, Dad finally found the person you sent to us. Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. How have you been? Have you been nurturing your dreams lately?" Today's story delves into themes of healing, responsibility, and the courage to love. even when it's daunting. Ava Mitchell, a dynamic creative director in high fashion, and Tom Callahan, a stoic and calculated CEO, both epitomize success and emotional fortitude. However, an unforeseen night, unplanned and unspoken, initiates a journey neither anticipated, a journey that won't just reshape their futures, but force them to face who they really are. So, take a moment with me. Let me tell you a story, one that began not with love, not even with hope, but with one quiet, unexpected night. It was celebration night at Maison Vera, a luxury fashion powerhouse based in Chicago. The company had just smashed sales records nationwide thanks to its latest campaign, The Real Shape, led by none other than Ava Mitchell. At 27, she wasn't just the youngest creative director in the firm's history, she was the one rewriting the rules. Everyone around her celebrated with laughter, music, champagne, but Ava, in a deep sapphire satin gown, quietly stood by the towering windows of the 42nd floor, watching the city glow. The skyline sparkled like gold dust, a million stories unfolding below her feet. And yet, her own heart felt still. Maybe success didn't always silence the ache. Quite the view, came a low voice behind her. Tom Callahan, the man behind the empire, 36 sharp, strategic, untouchable, the kind of man who never raised his voice because he never had to. He wore his power like a tailored suit, perfectly fitted and impossible to miss. "Congratulations," he said simply, no charm, no flattery, just truth. They stood in silence for a moment, and then they talked. At first about work, numbers, projections, campaign reach, but slowly the conversation slipped into something softer. She told him about her mother, a nurse who raised her alone, working double shifts just to make rent, yet never once forgot to show love. He paused, then spoke about his father, strict, unbending, obsessed with legacy, a man who called vulnerability weakness. And his mother? She was quiet, he said, and eventually she disappeared into her silence. There was no music, no flickering candlelight, just a shared bottle of wine and two people sitting on a leather couch as if it were neutral ground, talking, listening, slowly unraveling. And then, a kiss. Soft, slow, and then everything else stopped. Not out of passion, not out of romance, but because in that moment they weren't CEO and director. They were just two tired souls, no longer willing to face the night alone. Some truths don't need to be shouted. Two faint pink lines sufficed to upend Ava Mitchell's sense of control. 6 weeks after that night, she sat curled on the cool tile floor of her River North apartment bathroom. The third pregnancy test lay in her trembling hands. All three said the same thing: positive. The kind of positive that flips your life upside down. She stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the poised, unshakable Ava the world knew. Her curls were undone, her lips pale, eyes wide with fear. "Mitchell women don't break," she whispered to her reflection. "We bend, then we rise." Her mother had raised her alone while working night shifts as a nurse. She taught Ava that survival wasn't about strength. It was about choosing to keep going even when everything inside you wanted to stop. So, Ava stood up, wiped her face, put on a flawless navy pantsuit, and went to work. At the office, she functioned like clockwork. Meetings, presentations, emails. But the nausea was getting worse. And every time she passed Tom Callahan in the hallway, her stomach twisted, not from the baby, but from everything unspoken between them. They hadn't spoken about that night, not once. Until Monday morning, after a long, draining strategy session, Tom said, "Mitchell, a word in my office." Her heart skipped. Her fingers clenched around the file folder, but she followed him in, head held high. He didn't look up as he typed on his laptop. She stood, waiting, the tension thick. He began to speak, but she beat him to it. "I'm pregnant." Flat, direct, like ripping off a bandage. His fingers froze. He finally looked at her. Really looked. Are you sure? 3 tests, I'll confirm with the doctor. Silence fell heavy between them. He leaned back, folding his hands. What do you want? It wasn't curiosity, it was caution. Ava's blood went cold. Excuse me? Money? Support? A promotion? Just tell me. It wasn't his words that broke her. It was his tone, like she was a crisis he needed to contain. She stood, fire in her eyes, voice barely steady. I don't want your money, Tom. I don't want anything. I just thought, you deserve to know. Then she turned and walked out, her steps steady. Her heart? Not so much. Tom Callahan prided himself on maintaining unwavering control over numbers, people, and outcomes. Even emotions, to him, were variables to be managed. In his world, feelings were luxuries, distractions, weaknesses. But that morning after Ava had left his office with those quiet, cutting words, I just thought, you deserved to know. Tom sat still, unable to move. He didn't chase after her, didn't say a word. He just stayed there. In an office bathed in morning light that suddenly felt colder than ever. Ava walked quickly down the hallway, her heart pounding, but she didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because she had long stopped placing hope in men like Tom. She hadn't expected him to stop her, hadn't expected an apology. She didn't even need him to care. But what hurt was the way he looked at her, like she was a glitch in his perfect system. That afternoon, Ava submitted a formal request to transfer to the company's California office. She wasn't quitting, she wasn't running. She simply wanted to become a mother, without judgmental stares, without unanswered silence, without a man who couldn't show up but still tried to control things from a distance. 1 week later, Tom called her into his office again. I received your transfer request, he said. I'll start handing over my projects this week, Ava replied calmly. He nodded, but something had shifted in his expression. It wasn't cold. It wasn't soft either. It was conflicted. Why are you leaving? He asked, more gently this time. Because I need space, she answered, and because I don't want my child to grow up with a father who isn't present but still wants control. He said nothing. Ava stood to leave, but halfway to the door, she turned back. You know, Tom, she said, voice steady, I once thought, maybe underneath all that ice, you were a good man. He looked up, but maybe I was wrong. Her voice didn't accuse, it didn't blame. It was just disappointment. Raw, quiet, real. But that's okay, she added, her eyes calm. I grew up with an amazing mother. I didn't need a father to become who I am, and neither will my child. Then she walked out, no shaking hands, no hesitation, and Tom, for the first time in years, felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of loss. Not because he was losing a brilliant employee, but because a woman who once believed in something good inside him no longer did. Some shocks don't come from loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. They come from silence. The kind of silence someone leaves behind when they walk out of your life. For Tom Callahan, that silence carried Ava Mitchell's name. After she walked out of his office with those quiet but piercing words, I just thought you deserved to know, Tom was no longer the same. On the surface, he remained the perfect CEO, punctual, composed, sharp as ever, but at night he couldn't sleep. Instead, he sat alone in his downtown penthouse, reading article after article on pregnancy, development stages, symptoms, timelines. He didn't fully understand why he was doing it. All he knew was that he didn't want to repeat the pattern of his father. Tom's childhood was made of long, suffocating silences. His father, a respected lawyer, treated emotions like a disease. In their house, achievement was the only form of love. His mother, she was always there, physically, but emotionally she had long disappeared. Her quietness built a wall that Tom carried into every adult relationship. He had never told anyone this, not until his first session with a therapist. When the doctor asked him why he came, his answer was short but honest. I don't want to become him. From that moment on, Tom began to learn from scratch how to sit with uncomfortable feelings, how to recognize pain without running from it, how to see that control wasn't strength. Sometimes it was just fear wearing a tie. One late night, after wrestling with himself, he sent Ava an email. It read, "I'm trying to change, not for anyone else, but because I don't want to hurt anyone again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but if you're willing, I'd like to learn how to show up." There was no reply. But the next day, Ava accepted a coffee invitation from him, just a quiet cafe in a quiet neighborhood. Not to start over, but to see if the man who disappointed her was truly trying to be better. Tom arrived early. He ordered ginger tea and plain crackers, because one article mentioned it might help with morning sickness. When Ava walked in, her eyes were guarded. But when she saw the tea and the tiny plate of crackers waiting for her, something in her expression softened, just a little. They didn't talk about that night. They didn't bring up the hurt. Instead, they talked about her OBGYN, about birth plans, about what it felt like to realize there's a heartbeat growing inside you. Tom didn't pretend to understand. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. And for Ava, in that moment, a man who could simply listen without trying to control, without hiding behind logic, was already a small beginning. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, but something real. Neither of them expected the storm to hit so soon, loud, brutal, and without warning. Just days after their quiet meeting at the corner cafe, Ava was packing up her office, preparing for her upcoming transfer to California, when Olivia, her closest colleague, burst in with a look of panic on her face. "Have you seen the news?" she asked, holding up her phone. The headline blared across the screen. "Maison Vera CEO in alleged affair with subordinate, stock drops amid scandal." Ava froze. The article didn't just mention her and Tom. It painted a narrative suggesting the pregnancy was the result of a backroom deal. It called her a manipulator, accused her of trading intimacy for influence. Even her transfer was twisted into a strategic retreat to dodge consequences. The cold cruelty of those words cut deep into her pride, into her identity as a woman who'd fought for everything she had. Her phone lit up with messages, calls, and anonymous comments flooding her inbox. But Ava didn't cry. She straightened her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked toward Tom's office, knowing exactly what waited for her on the other side. Inside, Tom was in a meeting with legal and PR teams. His face darkened when he saw her. "I'm sorry," he said softly, and for the first time his voice carried no command, only regret. The PR spokesperson was preparing a press statement. "We'll deny everything," she explained. "Say the relationship never existed, that the transfer was entirely personal." But before Ava could respond, Tom stood. His voice wasn't angry, it was resolute. "No, we're not lying, we're not hiding, and we're certainly not going to let anyone shame the mother of my child." The room went still. Then he turned to Ava. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she didn't see fear of public fallout. She saw protection, sincerity, a man standing beside her, not above her. 1 hour later, at an emergency board meeting, Ava sat beside Tom. He didn't flinch, didn't deflect. He looked the board straight in the eye and said, "Yes, I'm the father of Ava's child, and no, she did not need favors or leverage to earn her place in this company. Ava Mitchell is one of the most capable professionals I've ever worked with, and the first person who's ever made me question the kind of man I want to be." The room fell into stunned silence. Then, unexpectedly, the CFO, usually the quietest person in the room, spoke up. "We stand by your decision," he said. One by one, heads nodded around the table. That afternoon, Ava didn't walk out of that boardroom as the center of a scandal. She walked out as a woman who had defended her dignity and kept her ground in the eye of the storm. And Tom Callahan, the man who once lived only for control and image, had done something he never imagined. He chose the truth, he chose her, he chose their child. 3 days before her scheduled move to California, just as Ava thought things were finally settling after the media storm, her body sent a different message. A sudden wave of dizziness hit in the middle of a Zoom meeting with her future team. Her screen blurred, the voices faded, and the next thing she remembered was waking up in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and a doctor speaking in a voice both calm and firm. "Your blood pressure spiked too quickly. We need to monitor you closely. Travel should be avoided for now." Ava nodded, holding back tears, not from fear, but exhaustion, the kind that comes when you've tried to be strong for too long. She clutched the freshly printed ultrasound photo the nurse had left on her bedside table, where that tiny heartbeat still pulsed strong, and whispered, barely audible, "Please stay safe, little one." Tom didn't hear about it through a medical update. He heard it from Charlotte, his younger sister, who called him at 5 a.m. while he was reviewing quarterly projections. "You should know," she said without preamble. "Ava was admitted last night, alone." The last word hit like a slap. He didn't hesitate. He dropped everything. No logistics, no strategy, just instinct. For the first time, Tom wasn't the calculated CEO. He was simply a man who knew he couldn't bear the thought of repeating his father's absence. Not this time. 3 hours later, Tom arrived at the hospital, still in his suit, hair tousled from a rushed flight. When he stepped into the room, Ava was sitting upright against her pillows, clearly startled. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Being here," he replied softly. "No explanations, no agenda, just presence." As the nurse came in to recheck her vitals, Tom stayed quietly beside her. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He just held her hand, gently, warmly, genuinely. For the first time in weeks, Ava didn't feel the need to be composed or strong. She wasn't a director or a strategist. She was simply a woman, scared and tired, and the man she once thought incapable of softness was right there, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to be. After the checkup, they sat in silence, bathed in the soft glow of the hospital light. Then Tom turned to her and said quietly, "This time, I'm not running, and if you'll let me, I'll stay, for as long as it takes." Ava looked at him for a long time, not to search for an answer, but to read his face. And what she saw wasn't the cold, impenetrable CEO. It was a man, still learning, still flawed, trying, honestly, to love in the only way he knew how. And for the first time in months, she nodded. Not because she had forgotten, not because she had forgiven, but because something real was beginning to change. 2 months after the night Ava was hospitalized, winter finally began to loosen its grip on Chicago. Spring crept in quietly, soft light through windows, gentler winds, and a sense of something quietly shifting. Life hadn't changed overnight, but something between Ava and Tom had. They didn't talk about us, didn't rush to name anything, but Tom stayed. He didn't ask what she needed, he simply started doing. Bottles washed, blood pressure tracked, sitting beside her during checkups, saying nothing, just being there. And then, on an early March morning while the city still slept under a blanket of fog, their daughter arrived. Following over 8 grueling hours of labor, Ava was rewarded with the sweetest sound. Her baby girl's inaugural cry. Tom stood beside her, his gloved hands trembling, eyes wide and shining with something he didn't have a name for, something like awe. The doctor placed the baby in his arms first. She was tiny, flushed, eyes still closed, but her fingers wrapped around his the moment she touched him, as if to say, "I know you're here." Tom froze, not in fear but in complete surrender. For the first time in his life, the world didn't revolve around him. He was just a man, holding something more important than anything he'd ever built. When he passed the baby to Ava, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes met, and tears filled them both. Quiet, warm, real. "She's beautiful," Ava whispered, her fingers brushing her daughter's cheek. "Her name is Sophie." "Sophie Callahan Mitchell," Tom repeated, tasting the name like a promise, a new beginning. Ava's recovery was slow. Tom didn't leave, not because he had to, but because something in him wouldn't let him be anywhere else. He changed diapers, learned to swaddle, took shifts holding Sophie while Ava slept. Sometimes he just sat quietly by the crib, listening to her breath and letting his world grow still for the first time. Ava didn't speak of the future. She didn't need to. There was still space between them, but something had softened. Each time she saw Tom hold their daughter, with clumsy hands and reverent care, something inside her softened too. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was trust. And for her, trust was everything. When they left the hospital, they didn't walk out hand in hand. They didn't kiss, but they walked side by side, like two people willing to try. Not for romance, not for the picture-perfect ending, but for a little girl with sleepy eyes and a name that meant clarity. Without rings or grand vows, a shared glance conveyed, "We'll embark on this journey, not flawlessly, but with all the goodness we possess." Thank you for staying till the end. If this story moves something inside you, let us know in the comments. And remember, love doesn't always begin with fireworks. Sometimes it starts with a whisper.